The mysterious void beneath Ethan Miller's failing farm would attract archaeologists, historians, and scientists from around the world. All discovered through one desperate farmer's last-ditch effort to save his family's three-generation legacy. With a $5,000 well-drilling gamble that everyone said would only delay the inevitable foreclosure. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind swept across Willow Creek Farm like a funeral. Dirge, carrying with it the scent of frost-bitten crops and the bitter promise of another harsh Midwest winter. Ethan Miller gripped the steering wheel of his weathered 2016 Ford F-150 as he navigated the rutted dirt road that led to what had to be either salvation or the final nail in his family's coffin. Through the cracked windshield, he caught sight of the drilling equipment being unloaded near the eastern field equipment. That had cost him his last $5,000 and represented a final chance to save the farm that had been in the Miller family since. 1946, Willow Creek Farm sprawled across 480 acres of rich Midwestern soil, 30 miles southwest of Des Moines, where the prairies began their gentle roll toward the distant Mississippi River. It was beautiful country when things went right, when the rains came on schedule and the crops grew tall, painting the rolling fields in shades of green that stretched to the horizon. The land had a timeless beauty that had sustained generations of farmers, with vast skies that seemed to humble human ambitions and remind everyone of their place in the natural order. But this year, like the two before it, a combination of droughts, followed by unseasonable flooding, had devastated his crops and left Ethan struggling to meet his financial obligations. The once fertile fields now looked barren and wounded under the gray November sky. Irrigation systems that had functioned reliably for decades were failing, and the water table seemed to be dropping with each passing season. The farm buildings, clustered around the original homestead site like survivors of some ancient battle. The main house, built by Ethan's grandfather, William Miller, in 1946, stood solid but weathered. Its wooden siding had withstood decades of seasons, and its steep pitched roof was designed to shed the heavy Midwestern snows. The barn, raised during a community building event in 1952, showed the evolution of the farm from a modest homestead to a substantial agricultural operation. Equipment sheds, silos, and storage buildings spread out from the central compound, each one representing years of hard work and careful investment. At 42, Ethan had never imagined himself as the man who would lose the family farm. Until 3 years ago, he had been managing the operation successfully, implementing sustainable farming practices his father had taught him, and maintaining the careful balance between tradition and innovation that had kept the Miller family solvent through market fluctuations, climate challenges, and changing agricultural policies. He was a third-generation farmer who understood soil, crops, and weather patterns with an intuition that couldn't be taught in agricultural schools. Ethan had been born on the farm, delivered by the local doctor in the same bedroom where his father had been born. He had learned to drive a tractor before he could properly ride a bicycle, spending his childhood summers helping with planting and harvests and learning to read the subtle signs that told experienced farmers when to plant, when to harvest, and when to prepare for challenging weather. His education had been a blend of traditional farming knowledge and modern agricultural science. After graduating from the local high school, he had earned a degree in agricultural science from Iowa State University, where he had studied the latest developments in crop genetics, soil management, and sustainable farming practices. But his real education had come from working alongside his father, James Miller, who had taught him that successful farming required more than book learning. It demanded an almost spiritual connection to the land and the cycles that governed it. When James Miller had died of a heart attack at age 67, Ethan had inherited not just the farm, but also the responsibility of preserving a way of life that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain in the modern world. Corporate agriculture was consolidating smaller operations. Climate change was making weather patterns more unpredictable, and the economics of family farming were being squeezed by rising costs and volatile crop prices. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But understanding the land couldn't protect against the perfect storm of circumstances that had devastated his operation. The weather problems had started 3 years ago, beginning as a late spring that delayed planting and gradually evolving into the kind of sustained weather pattern shifts that old-timers claimed happened only once in a generation. The first year, Ethan had been optimistic, drawing on his father's stories about previous difficult seasons and implementing water management measures that had worked in the past. By the second year, it became clear that something fundamentally different was happening. Weather patterns had shifted in ways that defied traditional prediction methods. Rainfall that had once been reliable was now coming in destructive torrents followed by weeks of drought. The groundwater that had sustained the farm for generations seemed to be dropping to levels that made irrigation increasingly difficult and expensive. Crop prices had plummeted just as his costs were skyrocketing, creating a financial vice that tightened with each passing month. The market collapse had been triggered by a combination of factors: oversupply from industrial farms, increased competition from cheaper imported produce, and changing consumer preferences that favored exotic fruits and vegetables over traditional Midwestern crops. The financial pressures had been manageable until Lisa's diagnosis changed everything. Lisa Anderson Miller had been Ethan's college sweetheart, the daughter of a local veterinarian who had surprised everyone by choosing to marry a farmer instead of pursuing the medical career that everyone had expected. She had been the perfect farmer's wife, intelligent, resourceful, and completely committed to preserving the Miller family legacy. Lisa had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 18 months ago, after weeks of symptoms that they had initially attributed to exhaustion and stress. The diagnosis had been devastating, not just emotionally, but financially. Even with insurance, the medical bills were crushing. The medications alone cost over $4,000 per month, and the specialists in Chicago and Rochester required expensive travel and extended stays away from the farm. The bank had been patient, but patience only lasted so long when mortgage payments were 4 months behind and the collateral was depreciating faster than the loan principal. First Iowa Agricultural Bank had been the Miller family's financial partner for 3 generations, but banking had changed since the days when a handshake and a man's reputation were sufficient collateral for operating loans. The new loan officers were young MBAs from Des Moines, who understood spreadsheets better than they understood farming, and they were increasingly nervous about the farm's ability to service its debt. Ethan's most recent meeting with the bank had been uncomfortably formal, held in the sterile conference room at the bank's branch in Des Moines, rather than in the informal setting where farm business had traditionally been conducted. The loan officer, a sharp-dressed woman named Jennifer Wells who couldn't have been older than 28, had been polite but firm in her assessment of the farm's financial situation. "Mr. Miller, I understand that your family has been banking with U.S. for generations, and we certainly appreciate that relationship," she had said, consulting a thick file of financial documents. "But I'm sure you understand that we have a fiduciary responsibility to our depositors and shareholders to ensure that our loans are properly secured and serviced." The numbers she presented had been stark and undeniable. The farm was leveraged at nearly 80% of its current assessed value, which had dropped significantly due to the weather conditions and depressed agricultural real estate market. The operating expenses exceeded income by an average of $7,000 per month, and that gap was widening as weather problems forced increased spending on irrigation while crop prices remained depressed. "We're prepared to work with you," Jennifer had continued. But we need to see a concrete plan for returning the operation to profitability within the next 12 months. Otherwise, we'll have to consider accelerating the loan and exploring foreclosure. Options. The well drilling had been Lisa's idea, a desperate suggestion born from her research into the farm's water history. Despite her MS diagnosis, Lisa had thrown herself into researching solutions to the farm's water crisis with the intensity of someone who knew they were fighting for their family's survival. She had spent countless hours at the county records office, the State Geological Survey, and the University Library, piecing together the water history of Willow Creek Farm and the surrounding area. "Ethan," she had said, showing him a century-old survey map she'd found in the county archives. "Look at this. There used to be a natural spring right where the old hickory grove stands. Your grandfather's journals mention it repeatedly, but it was never fully developed because the creek provided enough water back then." Lisa had discovered that the original farm survey from 1946 included references to multiple water sources that had been documented by the county surveyors, but had been forgotten as the farm developed around more obvious water systems. The map showed a geological formation that suggested underground water might still be accessible if they drilled deep enough in the right location. Her research had been meticulous and exhaustive. She had cross-referenced geological surveys from the 1950s with modern U.S. Geological Survey data, consulted with hydrologists at Iowa State University, and even tracked down retired farmers who remembered the area from their childhood. The consensus was that underground water sources existed throughout the region, but accessing them required expensive drilling operations that most farmers couldn't afford. "The geological formations are perfect," Lisa had explained, spreading maps and technical reports across the kitchen table. "We're sitting on top of an underground aquifer that extends for miles in every direction. The original settlers didn't need to tap into it because surface water was abundant, but it's still there, probably at depths of 200 to 300 feet. The location she had identified was in the eastern field where the land rose slightly toward a stand of ancient hickory trees that had somehow survived decades of farming. The trees themselves were evidence of deep groundwater. Their extensive root systems could reach water sources that were inaccessible to surface vegetation." Lisa's research indicated that the original farm boundary had followed natural contours that led to water sources, and the intersection she had identified represented the most promising drilling location on the entire property. "It will cost everything we have left," Ethan had warned her, though they both knew that everything they had left wouldn't be enough to save the farm anyway. "If we don't hit water, we're finished." "If we don't try, we're finished anyway," Lisa had replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands that had become more pronounced as her condition progressed. "At least this way we go down fighting." The decision to proceed with the well drilling had required liquidating their remaining savings and cashing in Lisa's modest retirement account from her previous job as a schoolteacher. The total available funds came to exactly $5,187, which would be sufficient for drilling to a depth of 300 feet if they encountered normal soil conditions and didn't hit unexpected rock formations that would require specialized equipment. Ethan had contacted Davidson Well Drilling and arranged for them to bring their equipment to the coordinates Lisa had identified. The company was owned by Richard Davidson, a second-generation well driller who had been operating in central Iowa for over 25 years. Richard had developed a reputation for honesty and competence that was rare in an industry that sometimes attracted less scrupulous operators. Richard had been honest about the odds when Ethan first contacted him. "Could be water down there. Could be nothing but rock and disappointment," he had said during their initial phone conversation. "In these changing conditions, I've drilled more dry holes than I care to count, but the geological surveys for your area do show promise if you can afford to go deep enough. The $5,000 would pay for drilling down to 300 feet, assuming they didn't encounter complications that would require additional equipment or specialized techniques. If they hit water, the additional costs for pump installation and piping to the main fields would require another loan that Ethan wasn't sure he could qualify for. If they hit nothing, the farm would be up for auction within 60 days. Richard Davidson had arrived at the farm 3 days earlier to survey the drilling site and prepare for the operation. He was a weathered man in his early 60s, who moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades working with dangerous equipment in remote locations. His crew consisted of his son Mark, a recent technical college graduate who was learning the family trade, and Carlos Ramirez, an experienced driller who had worked with Richard for over 15 years. The drilling equipment itself was impressive, a truck-mounted rig capable of boring through rock and soil with remarkable efficiency. The operation required careful preparation, including the construction of access roads to the drilling site and the transportation of water for the drilling process itself. Richard had explained that the drilling mud used to lubricate the bit and remove debris required thousands of gallons of water, which had to be trucked in from a nearby municipal source at considerable expense. As Ethan parked his truck near the drilling site that November morning, he watched Richard Davidson and his crew setting up the massive drilling rig with the efficiency of men who had done this hundreds of times before. The equipment looked impossibly large against the flat Iowa landscape, a mechanical intrusion into country that had remained essentially unchanged since his grandfather had first plowed these same rolling fields. "Morning, Ethan," Richard called, out, wiping his hands on a shop rag stained with hydraulic fluid and drilling mud. "Beautiful day for drilling. Wind's calm, ground's not too hard. We should be able to make good time." Ethan nodded, though he felt anything but optimistic about the day ahead. The previous night had been sleepless, spent reviewing financial projections and contingency plans that all led to the same inevitable conclusion. If the well drilling failed to produce water, Willow Creek Farm would be lost, and 3 generations of Miller family history would end with his failure to adapt to changing circumstances. "Any changes in your assessment of the site?" Ethan asked, though he knew Richard had already conducted extensive surveys and soil sampling. Richard pointed toward the slight rise where Lisa's research had indicated the best drilling prospects. "I walked the area again this morning, and I'm still thinking your wife's research is solid. The way those hickory trees have survived, there's gotta be water somewhere below. Question is whether it's accessible at a depth we can afford to reach." The hickories were indeed remarkable specimens, ancient trees with trunks over 3 feet in diameter and canopies that provided shade across nearly half an acre of ground. According to family legend, they'd been growing in that location when William Miller first purchased the land in 1946, and they had served as a landmark for travelers crossing the area during the late 19th century. Lisa had discovered references to the Hickory Grove in multiple historical sources, including county survey reports and the journals of travelers who had used the area as a camping spot during their journeys across the Midwest. The trees had apparently marked a reliable water source that had been known to Native American tribes for generations before white settlement, and their continued survival suggested that deep groundwater remained accessible despite the changing surface conditions. The drilling process would take most of the day, assuming they didn't hit unexpected rock formations or equipment problems. Ethan had arranged for his neighbor, Mark Thompson, to check on his remaining livestock so he could stay and watch the drilling progress. This was either going to be the day Willow Creek Farm found new life, or the day he accepted that 3 generations of Miller family farming were coming to an end. Mark Thompson owned the adjacent Riverside Farm, a smaller operation that had been struggling with the same weather conditions that were devastating Willow Creek. The Thompson family had been neighbors and friends of the Millers for generations, and Mark had been Ethan's closest friend since childhood. Their relationship had been tested by the financial pressures both families were facing, but Mark had never hesitated to provide help when Ethan needed it most. "You sure about this drilling operation?" Mark had asked when Ethan explained the plan. "That's a lot of money to gamble on something that might not pan out." "It's not really a gamble," Ethan had replied. "It's our only option. We're going to lose the farm anyway if we don't find water, so we might as well try something that could actually solve the problem." Mark had offered to contribute to the drilling costs, but his own operation was barely profitable, and Ethan couldn't accept help that might jeopardize another family's financial stability. The friendship was too important to risk on what might be a desperate and futile gesture. As the drilling rig roared to life and the massive bit began chewing through the Iowa soil, Ethan stood watching from a safe distance, thinking about his grandfather, William Miller, who had purchased this land in 1946 with nothing but a small inheritance, a loan from the county bank, and an unshakable belief that hard work and determination could build something lasting. William Miller had been 28 years old when he purchased the farm after returning from World War II with a Purple Heart and a determination to build a peaceful life far from the battlefields of Europe. He had arrived in Iowa with modest resources, but with the kind of practical skills and determination that were essential for success in post-war agriculture. The original farm had been only 160 acres, but William had gradually expanded the operation by purchasing adjacent properties from farmers who were retiring or moving to urban areas in search of industrial jobs. By 1960, Willow Creek Farm encompassed nearly 500 acres and supported diverse crops and livestock, making it one of the most successful operations in the county. William had survived droughts, blizzards, and economic downturns that had driven many other farmers out of business. The winter of 1958 had been particularly devastating, with temperatures dropping to 30 below zero and snow accumulating to depths that made feeding livestock almost impossible. That winter had broken many farmers, but William had survived by implementing innovative feeding strategies and by maintaining emergency supplies that carried his operation through the crisis. He had built the original farmhouse with help from neighboring farmers, using lumber from a local sawmill and stone he had gathered from nearby creek beds. The house had been expanded and modernized over the decades, but the original structure remained solid and functional, a testament to the craftsmanship and durability that had characterized rural construction. The farming operation that William established had been based on principles that remained valid. More than 7 decades later, careful selection of crop varieties adapted to local conditions, sustainable soil management practices that preserved the land's long-term productivity, and diversified income sources that provided stability during periods of market volatility. His success had been built on understanding the land and working with natural systems rather than trying to impose artificial solutions on the challenging Midwestern environment. By noon, the drilling crew had reached 100 feet without hitting significant water, but Richard Davidson remained optimistic about the prospects. "Ground's drilling easy, and we're seeing some promising signs," he reported during a brief lunch break. "Soil samples are showing the kind of mineral content that usually indicates underground water sources nearby." Ethan felt a flicker of hope as the afternoon drilling continued. Lisa's research had suggested that water would most likely be found at depths between 200 and 300 feet, and they were making good progress toward that target range. The drilling was proceeding faster than expected, which meant they might be able to reach greater depths than originally planned without exceeding their budget. At 150 feet, they encountered a layer of clay that suggested they were approaching groundwater. The clay was dense and impermeable, the type of geological formation that often trapped water in underground reservoirs. Richard's experience told him that water-bearing sand and gravel were likely to be found below the clay layer, possibly at depths of 200 to 250 feet. At 180 feet, the drill samples began showing moisture content that had everyone excited. The soil was noticeably darker and more cohesive, indicating the presence of groundwater that was seeping up from deeper formations. Carlos Ramirez, who had been drilling wells for over 20 years, pronounced the signs very encouraging and predicted they would hit significant water within the next 50 feet. But it was at 212 feet that everything changed in ways that no one could have anticipated. The drilling rig suddenly lurched and dropped slightly, as if the bit had broken through into an open space. The change was so dramatic that Richard Davidson shut down the equipment immediately, his experienced instincts telling him that they had encountered something unusual, something that definitely wasn't a typical water-bearing formation. "Ethan," Richard called out, his voice carrying a strange mixture of excitement and confusion. "Need you to come take a look at this. I've been drilling wells for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened." As Ethan approached the drilling rig, he could see that Richard and his crew were already examining the drill bit and the most recent soil samples with expressions of puzzled amazement. "The bit just dropped nearly 3 feet all at once," Richard explained. "It's like we hit a void in open space underground. That's not normal at this depth, not in this type of geological formation." Ethan stared at the drilling equipment, trying to understand what Richard was describing. "A void? Like a cave?" "Maybe," Richard replied, "but natural caves in this region are extremely rare, especially at this depth and in these soil conditions. And this doesn't feel like a natural formation. The way the bit dropped, it was too sudden, too uniform. Like we broke through a ceiling." The implications were both confusing and potentially troubling. If there was an open space 212 feet below his farm, it could represent either an extraordinary opportunity or a serious problem. Natural caves could contain valuable water resources, but they could also create structural instability that might threaten the farm's buildings and fields. "What do we do now?" Ethan asked, his mind racing with possibilities. Richard considered the question carefully. "We could continue drilling and try to understand the extent of the void. Or we could bring in specialized equipment to explore it, cameras, sensors, that sort of thing. But that would be expensive, probably beyond what you've budgeted for this operation." The decision wasn't easy. Continuing to drill might damage whatever was down there, potentially destroying something valuable or creating additional problems. But bringing in specialized exploration equipment would cost thousands of dollars they didn't have, with no guarantee that the discovery would provide any benefit to the farm's water crisis. "Let's lower a camera," Ethan decided, remembering that his neighbor Mark had purchased a specialized well camera for inspecting his irrigation systems. "At least we can get a basic idea of what we're dealing with before making any major decisions." Within an hour, Mark Thompson had arrived with his well camera, a waterproof, high-definition system designed to be lowered into boreholes to inspect underground conditions. The camera was attached to 300 feet of reinforced cable and connected to a monitor that would allow them to see whatever was hidden beneath the farm. "Never used it at this depth before," Mark warned as they prepared to lower the camera into the borehole. "No guarantees it'll work properly, but it's worth a try." As the camera descended past the 200-foot mark, everyone gathered around the monitor, watching intently as it approached the void that had interrupted their drilling operation. The image was grainy and occasionally distorted by water droplets on the lens, but it was clear enough to reveal something extraordinary. At 212 feet, the camera emerged into an open space that was far larger than anyone had anticipated. The void wasn't a natural cave or a small pocket. It appeared to be a constructed chamber with smooth walls and what looked like deliberate architectural features. "What the hell?" Richard muttered, adjusting the camera's lights to improve visibility. "That's not natural. That's man-made." The camera revealed a chamber approximately 30 feet in diameter with a ceiling that appeared to be reinforced with metal supports. The walls weren't rough cave surfaces but smooth, curved structures that had clearly been engineered and constructed. Most surprisingly, The chamber contained what appeared to be artifacts, metal containers, equipment of some kind, and structures whose purpose wasn't immediately obvious. Is that furniture? Mark asked, pointing to shapes that resembled desks or workstations arranged around the perimeter of the chamber. And look at that. There's a door or passageway leading somewhere else, Carlos added, indicating an opening in the far wall of the chamber. Ethan stared at the monitor in stunned silence, trying to process what they were seeing. 200 feet beneath his struggling farm lay what appeared to be a man-made facility of some kind, a structure that had been deliberately built and then hidden deep underground, with no surface indication of its existence. "Richard," Ethan asked quietly, "have you ever seen anything like this before?" The well driller shook his head slowly. "Never, not even close. I've hit old foundations, abandoned wells, even some Native American artifacts. But nothing like this, nothing this deep, nothing this elaborate." The discovery raised more questions than answers. Who had built this underground facility? When? Had it been constructed? What was its purpose? And most importantly for Ethan, did its existence represent a potential solution to his water problems, or just another complication in an already desperate situation? "We need to report this," Richard said finally. "This kind of discovery, it's beyond my expertise. Could be historically significant, could be dangerous, could be government property for all we know." But Ethan was already thinking beyond the immediate shock of the discovery. If there was a large man-made structure beneath his farm, it represented a potential asset that might change his financial situation. At the very least, it might provide leverage with the bank, a reason to extend his loans, while the discovery was investigated. "Let's get more information before calling in officials," Ethan suggested. "If we can understand what we're looking at, we'll be in a better position to deal with whatever comes next." Mark nodded in agreement. "My cousin works for the university geology department. She might be able to help us identify what we're seeing without triggering a full government response that could tie up your property for months." The next few hours were a blur of activity as they continued exploring the underground chamber with Mark's camera. They discovered that the space was even larger than initially thought, with multiple connected rooms extending beyond the main chamber. The facility appeared to include storage areas, what looked like living quarters, and spaces filled with machinery whose purpose they couldn't determine from the limited camera views. Most intriguingly, they found markings and symbols on some of the walls and containers, not standard English text, but what appeared to be specialized technical notations, or perhaps code designations. The entire facility had the look of a professional installation designed for long-term use, not a temporary structure or a natural formation that had been adapted for human purposes. By late afternoon, Mark's cousin Dr. Elena Thompson had arrived from the university. An associate professor of geology with a background in archaeological assessment, Elena was exactly the kind of expert they needed. Someone with scientific credentials who could provide preliminary analysis without official entanglements. After reviewing the camera footage and examining the soil samples from around the void, Elena offered her initial assessment. "This isn't a natural formation, that's absolutely clear. It's a constructed facility that appears to date from the mid-20th century based on the visible materials and construction techniques. My best guess is that it's some type of government installation, possibly military or research related." "Government installation? On my farm?" Ethan asked, struggling to reconcile this idea with his family's history. "Wouldn't my grandfather have known about it?" Elena considered this question carefully. Not necessarily. During the Cold War era, particularly the late 1940s through the 1960s, numerous classified facilities were constructed throughout the Midwest. Many landowners were either not informed or were sworn to secrecy about what was being built on or under their property. National security concerns overrode normal property rights in many cases. The timing aligned with when William Miller had purchased the farm in 1946, immediately after returning from World War II. Could his grandfather have been involved in some way? Had he known about the facility beneath his fields? We need to check historical records, Elena continued. County permits, land use agreements, maybe military archives if we can access them. This kind of installation would have required significant resources and personnel to construct. There should be some documentary evidence, even if it was classified at the time. The implications were both exciting and concerning. If Elena was right about the facility's origins, it might have historical and perhaps even scientific significance that went far beyond Ethan's immediate water problems. But government involvement could also mean complicated legal issues regarding ownership, access, and potential environmental concerns. What should I do now? Ethan asked, looking from Elena to Richard to Mark, seeking guidance in a situation that had moved far beyond his experience or expectations. Document everything, Elena advised. Take detailed notes. Preserve all the camera footage. Maintain careful records of exactly what you found and where. Then I'd suggest a measured approach to notification, starting with the universities, archaeology department rather than federal agencies. That will give us time to better understand what we're dealing with before triggering potentially complicated government involvement. As the November sun began to set, casting long shadows across the farm, Ethan found himself standing beside the drilling rig with a mix of emotions he couldn't fully process. The day that had begun with a desperate attempt to find water for his struggling farm had transformed into something entirely unexpected. The discovery of a hidden facility that might represent either an extraordinary opportunity or yet another complication in his fight to save his family's legacy. That night, as Ethan showed Lisa the camera footage and explained the day's remarkable developments, he could see hope rekindling in her eyes for the first time in months. Whatever lay beneath their farm represented something new and unexpected, factor that changed the calculus of their desperate situation. This could be it, Ethan, Lisa said, her hands steady as she examined still images from the camera footage. This could be what saves the farm. Ethan wasn't so sure the discovery raised as many problems as it might solve, but he understood her need for hope. After months of watching their options steadily diminish, they had stumbled onto something extraordinary, something that at the very least would buy them time to find a sustainable solution to their financial crisis. As they reviewed the footage, again, Lisa pointed to something they hadn't noticed earlier, what appeared to be a symbol or logo, visible on one of the metal containers in the main chamber. It wasn't clear enough to identify definitively, but it seemed to incorporate elements that suggested a government or military origin. We need to find out what that symbol means, Lisa said. It could tell us exactly what this facility was used for. Ethan nodded, already planning how to proceed with further investigation. Whatever lay beneath Willow Creek Farm had been deliberately hidden and preserved for decades. Now it had been discovered through a desperate attempt to save a struggling family operation, and its secrets might hold the key to preserving 3 generations of Miller family history. The broke farmer who had spent his last $5,000 on a desperate well-drilling gamble had no idea that his discovery would soon attract experts from around the world and reveal secrets that had been buried for over 7 decades, secrets that would prove far more valuable than the water he had been seeking, and that would transform Willow Creek Farm from a failing operation on the verge of foreclosure into the site of one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries in Midwestern history. The sound of tires on gravel woke Ethan before dawn the next morning. Through the farmhouse window, he could see headlights moving slowly along the access road, not local vehicles, but a convoy of black SUVs with government license plates that sent a jolt of adrenaline through his entire body. Lisa appeared beside him at the window, her face pale in the pre-dawn light. They're here already? How could they know so quickly? Ethan shook his head, equally baffled. They had been careful about who they told. Only Elena, Mark, and Richard's crew knew about the discovery. Yet somehow, less than 24 hours after finding the underground facility, official vehicles were arriving at the farm. "Stay inside," Ethan told Lisa. "Let me handle this." As he stepped onto the porch, the lead SUV pulled up to the house and a woman in her 50s emerged. She wore a dark suit and carried a leather portfolio, her demeanor projecting authority and efficiency. "Mr. Miller? I'm Dr. Catherine Reeves, Department of Energy, Historical Assessment Division." She extended her hand. "We need to discuss what you found yesterday." Ethan shook her hand cautiously. "How did you know about that?" Dr. Reeves' expression remained neutral. "Certain sites are monitored for potential discovery. When your drilling operation reached a specific depth at these coordinates, it triggered an alert in our system." The revelation was unsettling. His farm had been under some form of surveillance for decades without his knowledge. Before he could respond, 3 more individuals exited the other vehicles, 2 men in similar professional attire and a younger woman carrying scientific equipment. "This is my team," Dr. Reeves explained. "We're here to conduct a preliminary assessment of the facility you've discovered, and to explain some things about your property that you may not be aware of." Ethan gestured toward the kitchen. "We should talk inside." Around the kitchen table, with Lisa now joining them, Dr. Reeves opened her portfolio and revealed documents that appeared to be decades old, many stamped with classified watermarks that had been officially crossed out with declassified stamps dated just a few years earlier. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, what you've discovered beneath your farm is a Cold War-era facility known as Deep Shield Station 7, one of 12 such installations constructed between 1947 and 1952 across the Midwest. These facilities were designed as continuity of government sites, secure locations where essential personnel and resources could be housed in the event of a nuclear attack." She laid out a map showing the network of installations spanning several states, with Willow Creek Farm clearly marked as one of the sites. The map was dated 1950 and included technical specifications that went far beyond what Ethan would have imagined possible for that era. "Your grandfather, William Miller, was recruited specifically to purchase this land and serve as its surface custodian," Dr. Reeves continued. "As a decorated war veteran with technical training, he was considered an ideal candidate for the program." Ethan struggled to process this information. "Are you saying my grandfather knew about this facility all along?" "He did," Dr. Reeves confirmed. "He was one of a select group of farmer custodians chosen to provide cover for these installations. The program was called Agricultural Shield, combining legitimate farming operations with classified infrastructure protection." She showed them a photograph Ethan had never seen before, his grandfather in military uniform, shaking hands with men in suits, standing before what appeared to be construction blueprints. The photo was dated October 1946, just weeks before William had purchased the farm. "William Miller wasn't just a farmer who happened to buy this land," Dr. Reeves explained. "He was a carefully selected operative tasked with establishing a working farm above a critical government facility while maintaining absolute secrecy about what lay beneath his fields." Lisa leaned forward, her medical background bringing different questions to mind. Was it safe, having this facility under the farm all these years? "Completely safe," Dr. Reeves assured her. "The installation was designed with multiple containment systems and extensive shielding. There was never any radiation risk or environmental hazard to the surface operation." She turned to another document in her portfolio. "What makes your discovery particularly significant is that Station 7 was never decommissioned. While most similar facilities were emptied and sealed by the mid-1980s as Cold War tensions eased, this one was maintained in standby condition due to its unique features and contents." "Contents?" Ethan asked. "What exactly is down there?" Dr. Reeves exchanged glances with her colleagues before continuing. Station 7 housed specialized research equipment and archived materials related to the early atomic energy program. But more importantly for your situation, it contains extensive documentation about sustainable agriculture systems designed to function after potential nuclear conflict, including advanced water management technologies that were decades ahead of their time. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. He had been desperately searching for water while living above a facility that potentially contained solutions to exactly that problem. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Do you just take over my farm? Kick us out?" Dr. Reeves shook her head. "Quite the opposite, Mr. Miller. The Department of Energy has been waiting for this moment, for a legitimate heir to William Miller to rediscover this facility. According to protocols established when the program was initialized, once discovered by an authorized descendant, the non-classified contents of the facility transfer to the property owner's control." She slid a document across the table, a complex legal agreement dated 1947 and signed by William Miller. "Your grandfather agreed to maintain the surface operation in exchange for eventual family ownership of the facility's agricultural innovations once they were declassified. That time has now come." The implications began to dawn on Ethan. "Are you saying there's valuable technology down there?" "Technology that could help save the farm." "More than you might imagine," Dr. Reeves replied. Station 7 was specifically focused on water conservation and purification systems. The research conducted there laid the groundwork for technologies we're only now implementing on a commercial scale. And according to our agreement with William Miller, the non-classified elements of that research now belong to you. Over the next several hours, Dr. Reeves and her team outlined the process for accessing and assessing the underground facility. They would need to conduct a safety inspection first, ensuring that the structure remained intact and that any sensitive materials were properly secured. Once that was complete, Ethan and Lisa would be granted access to explore their extraordinary inheritance. By mid-afternoon, the team had established a secure access shaft using the existing borehole as a starting point. Specialized equipment had been brought in to widen the opening and install a temporary elevator system that would allow controlled descent into the facility. Dr. Reeves, now dressed in protective coveralls, prepared to lead the first inspection team down. "We'll conduct a preliminary assessment and secure any still classified materials. It should take about 3 hours. Then you'll be cleared to join us." As the government team disappeared into the earth beneath his farm, Ethan tried to reconcile his new understanding of his family's history with the story he'd always been told. His grandfather hadn't been just a returning soldier who decided to try farming. He had been part of a classified government program, maintaining a cover story that had persisted for generations. "Do you think my father knew?" Ethan asked Lisa. As they waited, "Did he spend his whole life keeping this secret too?" Lisa considered the question carefully. "Maybe, or maybe William never told him. Your dad always talked about your grandfather as a traditional farmer, someone who taught him everything about agriculture. There was never any hint of something more." The question remained unanswered as Dr. Reeves returned to the surface several hours later, her expression a mixture of excitement and professional restraint. "It's remarkable," she reported. "The preservation systems functioned perfectly. The facility is intact, clean, and operational. We've secured the few remaining classified items, but the vast majority of the installation and its contents are now cleared for your access." She handed Ethan what looked like an ordinary key card. "This will activate the elevator and the facility systems. You're cleared to enter whenever you're ready." Ethan and Lisa exchanged glances, both understanding the magnitude of the moment. They were about to enter a piece of hidden history, a Cold War time capsule that had been waiting beneath their struggling farm for over 70 years. The elevator descent was smooth and surprisingly quiet. The modern equipment installed by Dr. Reeves' team contrasting with the historical nature of what they were about to encounter. As they dropped past the 200-foot mark, Ethan felt a strange sense of connection to his grandfather, the man who had kept this extraordinary secret. Throughout his life while building the farming legacy Ethan had been fighting to preserve. The elevator doors opened onto a scene that exceeded their expectations. The main chamber was larger than the camera footage had suggested. Circular room approximately 40 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling reinforced with a geometric pattern of metal supports. The walls were painted a practical institutional green that had barely faded despite the decades, and the floor was made of polished concrete that still gleamed under the LED lights Dr. Reeves' team had installed to supplement the facility's original fluorescent fixtures. But it was the contents of the chamber that took their breath away. Along the walls stood intact workstations with what appeared to be early computer equipment, mechanical calculators, and specialized scientific instruments. Glass-fronted cabinets contained hundreds of technical manuals, research journals, and file boxes filled with documents. At the center of the room stood a large model or diorama of what appeared to be advanced agricultural systems, irrigation networks, underground water storage facilities, and specialized crop arrangements designed for maximum efficiency. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered, moving toward the central model. "These designs, they're decades ahead of their time. Some of these approaches are just now being considered cutting edge." Dr. Reeves nodded. The scientists who worked here were thinking about problems we're only now confronting on a large-scale: water scarcity, climate instability, soil degradation. They were developing solutions for the post-nuclear environment that are perfectly applicable to our current agricultural challenges. As they explored further, they discovered that the facility extended well beyond the main chamber. A network of smaller rooms contained living quarters, storage areas, and specialized research spaces. Most importantly for Ethan's immediate concerns, one large room was dedicated entirely to water management systems, including working prototypes of filtration technology, aquifer access designs, and irrigation methods that had never been implemented on the surface. This room alone contains solutions worth millions in today's agricultural market, Dr. Reeves explained. The patents for these systems were filed under national security provisions and never released commercially. According to our agreement with William Miller, the rights to implement these technologies on this property now belong to you. Ethan examined the water filtration system, a remarkably elegant design that could process groundwater with minimal energy requirements. "This could solve our immediate water problems," he said. "But the commercial potential goes far beyond our farm." "Exactly," Dr. Reeves agreed. "You're looking at intellectual property with significant market value. The Department of Energy will assist with patent transfers and commercialization strategies if you decide to pursue that route." As they continued exploring, they discovered something even more unexpected: a sealed vault containing detailed records of William Miller's involvement with the program. The documents revealed that his role had gone far beyond simply providing cover for the underground facility. He had actively participated in the agricultural research, contributing practical farming knowledge that helped shape the theoretical work happening beneath his fields. One journal entry, dated September 1951, revealed the depth of William's commitment. "Today we completed the aquifer mapping project, combining my surface observations with Dr. Hoffman's underground sensing technology. The results confirm what I've suspected: this land sits above a water resource that could sustain agriculture through even the worst droughts if properly accessed and managed. The techniques we're developing could transform farming not just here but across the Midwest. I only hope that someday my family will benefit from this work, even if I can never tell them about it directly." Ethan felt tears forming as he read his grandfather's words, the voice of a man who had been working for his family's future in ways they had never known or understood. William Miller hadn't just been keeping government secrets. He had been actively contributing to research that might someday save the farm he loved. He knew, Ethan said quietly. He knew there would be water challenges eventually, and he was already working on solutions that we might need decades later. As the day of exploration continued, the full value of what they had discovered became increasingly clear. Beyond the immediate water management technologies that could save Willow Creek Farm, the facility contained agricultural innovations that had significant commercial potential: seed storage systems, soil analysis methods, and climate adaptation strategies that were still relevant in the modern era. By evening, when they finally returned to the surface, Ethan and Lisa had a transformed understanding of their situation. What had begun as a desperate attempt to find water had uncovered a legacy that offered not just immediate solutions to their farm's problems, but potential prosperity beyond anything they had imagined. Dr. Reeves presented them with a preliminary assessment of the facility's contents and their potential value. Conservative estimates put the intellectual property value at between $8 to $12 million, depending on how the technologies are commercialized. The historical value is harder to quantify, but could be substantial if you choose to pursue that angle. She handed them a thick folder containing legal documents relating to their ownership rights. These confirm your inheritance of the non-classified materials and technologies. Our legal team will work with you to navigate the patent transfers and any commercialization strategies you decide to pursue. As the government vehicles departed that evening, Ethan and Lisa sat on their porch watching the sunset over fields that suddenly held new promise. The farm that had been weeks away from foreclosure now represented an extraordinary opportunity, not just for financial recovery, but for implementing agricultural innovations that William Miller had helped develop decades earlier. What do we do first? Lisa asked, her medical background already considering the potential health applications of some of the water purification technologies they had discovered. Ethan looked out over the land his family had worked for 3 generations, seeing it with new eyes. We honor my grandfather's legacy. We implement the water management systems to save the farm. Then we figure out how to share these innovations with other farmers facing similar challenges. The path forward wouldn't be simple. There would be legal complexities in commercializing decades-old classified technologies, challenges in implementing systems that had never been tested on a working modern farm, and inevitable questions about the facility's history and purpose. But for the first time in years, they faced these challenges from a position of strength rather than desperation. As darkness fell over Willow Creek Farm, Ethan thought about his grandfather, the decorated war veteran who had purchased this land with a secret purpose and spent his life protecting both his family's future and his country's interests. William Miller had lived a double life that his descendants never suspected, working above ground as a simple farmer while contributing to classified research that might someday save the agricultural systems he valued. The man who had seemed a straightforward Iowa farmer had actually been something much more complex, a visionary who understood that the knowledge hidden beneath his fields might someday be the salvation of the farm he loved. And now, 3 generations later, his grandson had uncovered that hidden legacy just when the family needed it most. The desperate well-drilling gamble that had seemed like a final, futile gesture had instead revealed secrets that would transform not just the Miller family's fortunes, but potentially agricultural practices across the drought-threatened Midwest. The broke farmer who had spent his last $5,000 searching for water had discovered something far more valuable, a hidden legacy of innovation and foresight that had been waiting patiently beneath the Iowa soil for the moment when it would be most needed. 5 years after the discovery beneath Willow Creek Farm, Ethan Miller stood at the edge of his eastern field, watching as a group of agricultural students from Iowa State University examined the innovative irrigation system that had transformed his once failing operation into a model of sustainable farming. The field, once parched and struggling, now supported thriving crops that outperformed county averages by nearly 30% while using 60% less water than conventional methods. The key is working with the natural water table rather than fighting against it, Ethan explained to the students, gesturing toward the subtle network of sensors and micro-irrigation points that were barely visible among the crops. These systems were designed to maximize efficiency while minimizing disruption to the soil structure. What he didn't mention was that the technology they were studying had been developed decades earlier in a classified government facility that still operated beneath their feet, now repurposed as the Midwest Agricultural Innovation Center, a research facility that partnered with universities across the country to develop solutions for climate-challenged farming regions. Lisa joined the group, walking more confidently now after a successful course of treatment for her, a treatment they could afford thanks to the transformation of their financial situation. She carried a tablet displaying real-time data from the soil monitoring system. "We're seeing remarkable resilience in these new hybrid varieties," she told the students. "The drought-tolerance genetics combined with our precision irrigation approach means these crops can thrive even during extended dry periods." The journey from near bankruptcy to their current status as agricultural innovators had not been straightforward. The initial months after discovering the underground facility had been a whirlwind of legal negotiations, patent applications, and intense planning. The technologies developed by William Miller and his Cold War colleagues had required significant adaptation to work with modern farming equipment and practices. First Iowa Agricultural Bank, which had been preparing foreclosure proceedings just months earlier, had quickly changed their stance when presented with the patent valuations and commercialization plans for their rediscovered technologies. Jennifer Wells, the loan officer who had once delivered the grim financial assessment of the farm's prospects, now managed a specialized agricultural innovation financing division, created specifically to support implementation of the Miller water management systems across drought-affected regions. "What impressed me most about Ethan's approach," Jennifer often told colleagues, "wasn't just the remarkable technology he discovered, but how he chose to implement it. Instead of maximizing short-term profits, he created a sustainable business model that balances commercial success with genuine assistance to struggling farming communities." That business model had evolved from late-night conversations between Ethan and Lisa in the weeks following their discovery. They had realized that simply patenting and licensing the technologies for maximum profit would betray the spirit of what William Miller had helped create. Instead, they established the Miller Agricultural Innovation Trust, a structure that ensured the core water management technologies would be available at affordable rates to family farms while still generating sufficient revenue to sustain ongoing research and development. The approach had proven remarkably successful. Within 2 years, the water management systems had been implemented on over 200 farms across 4 states, creating a network of demonstration sites that provided real-world testing while helping save operations that might otherwise have failed. The commercial applications in larger agricultural operations and municipal water systems generated substantial licensing revenue that funded continued refinement of the technologies. Dr. Catherine Reeves had remained involved, serving as a bridge between government research programs and the Miller Trust. Her expertise in navigating the complex regulatory environment had proven invaluable as they worked to bring classified Cold War technology into the public domain. "What you've accomplished here represents the best possible outcome of the agricultural SHIELD program," she had told Ethan during her most recent visit. "Your grandfather would be proud to see how you've honored his vision while making it accessible to the farming community he valued so deeply." As the university group moved toward the next demonstration area, Ethan noticed a familiar silver BMW pulling up the farm drive. His sister Rachel emerged from the vehicle, her appearance dramatically different from 5 years earlier. Gone was the harried emergency room doctor who had been skeptical of his desperate well-drilling gamble. In her place stood the confident medical director of the newly established Agricultural Health Research Center that operated in partnership with the Innovation Facility. Rachel had initially been stunned by the discovery beneath the farm, but her medical background had quickly allowed her to recognize the potential health applications of the water filtration technologies. She had taken a sabbatical from her hospital position to explore these possibilities and had never returned to her previous career. "The students look impressed," she commented, joining Ethan as they watched the university group examining crop rows. "They should be. The yield projections for this season are exceptional, especially considering the regional drought conditions." The ongoing climate challenges that had nearly destroyed Willow Creek Farm had only intensified across the agricultural regions of the Midwest, making the water management innovations increasingly valuable. Farms that had implemented the Miller systems were showing remarkable resilience, while those using conventional approaches continued to struggle. "How's the clinical trial progressing?" Ethan asked, referring to the research program Rachel was leading on potential health benefits of the specialized water filtration technology. "Promising," she replied. "The reduction in contaminant levels is more significant than we initially projected, and the preliminary health outcome data looks positive. If the final results confirm our hypothesis, we could be looking at a major advancement in rural water quality management." Their department chair is talking about establishing a permanent research partnership, and the delegation from Nebraska arrives tomorrow. 7 county agricultural commissioners looking to implement these systems across their drought emergency zones. The visitors had become a regular feature of life at Willow Creek. Government officials, agricultural researchers, environmental specialists, and struggling farmers came from across the country and increasingly from around the world to study the integrated water management approach that had transformed a once failing operation into a showcase of resilient farming. Later that evening, as the farm quieted and the various research teams departed, Ethan sat on the porch of the farmhouse his grandfather had built, looking out over fields that now represented not just family history, but a vision for agricultural sustainability that was reaching far beyond what he had ever imagined. Lisa joined him, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea from the kitchen. "I was reviewing the expansion proposals for the demonstration network," she said. "The drought conditions in the western states are creating urgent demand for implementation. We could double our current coverage within 18 months if we approve all the qualified applications." The scale of what they had built still sometimes overwhelmed Ethan. From the brink of losing everything, they had created an enterprise that now employed over 80 people directly, supported implementation projects on hundreds of farms, and generated research that was influencing agricultural policy at the national level. What would my grandfather think of all this? Ethan wondered aloud. He spent his life keeping this secret, never able to share what he knew or implement the technologies he helped develop. "I think he'd be proud," Lisa replied. "Not just of what we've built, but how we've built it. We've stayed true to what seems to have mattered most to him, preserving family farming as a viable way of life, even in the face of changing conditions." The evidence supported her assessment. Among William Miller's personal papers found in the underground facility had been journals documenting his struggle to balance his classified work with his commitment to the farming community. One entry from 1953 had particularly resonated with Ethan. The technologies we're developing could transform agriculture, but their true value will only be realized if they serve the family farms that form the backbone of American food production. Power concentrated in too few hands, whether government or corporate, ultimately serves neither the land nor the people who work it. That philosophy had guided their approach to commercializing the rediscovered technologies. Rather than selling the patents to the highest bidder or restricting access to maximize profits, They had created a tiered implementation model that prioritized family farms in climate-vulnerable regions while generating sustainable revenue through commercial applications and larger agricultural operations. The results had exceeded even their most optimistic projections. Beyond the financial success, they had created a model for climate-adaptive agriculture that preserved family farming operations while reducing water usage and environmental impact. The approach was drawing attention from policymakers looking for sustainable solutions to increasingly urgent agricultural challenges. Richard Davidson, the well driller whose expertise had led to the initial discovery, now oversaw the specialized installation training program that prepared contractors across the country to implement the water management systems. His practical knowledge had proven invaluable in adapting the theoretical designs from the underground facility for real-world application in diverse geological conditions. "Never would have guessed where that drilling job would lead," he often remarked. 30 years in the business, and I thought I'd seen everything. Turns out I was just getting started." The transformation extended beyond the technical and financial aspects of the operation. The Miller family home, once showing signs of deferred maintenance and financial strain, had been carefully restored to its original condition while integrating modern energy efficiency features. The barn and outbuildings had been repurposed to support the research and demonstration activities, with new construction designed to complement the historical structures rather than overshadow them. Most significantly, the farm remained a working agricultural operation rather than being converted entirely to research purposes. Ethan continued to oversee crop production across the original acreage, implementing the innovative water management systems while maintaining traditional farming practices where they remained effective. This balanced approach had created a demonstration site that was particularly valuable for conventional farmers considering adoption of the new technologies. Unlike purely experimental research facilities, Willow Creek Farm showed how innovation could be integrated into working agricultural operations without abandoning proven methods that had sustained generations of family farming. As darkness fell over the farm, Ethan and Lisa were joined on the porch by Carlos Ramirez, who had transitioned from Richard Davidson's drilling crew to become the lead implementation specialist for the Miller water management systems. His technical skills combined with practical field experience had made him invaluable in adapting the technologies for diverse agricultural settings. The Nebraska team arrived early, Carlos reported. They're already reviewing the implementation data from similar soil conditions in South Dakota. Their drought situation is critical. They're looking at widespread crop failures if they can't establish more resilient irrigation systems before next season. The urgency of such situations had become increasingly common as climate patterns continued to shift across agricultural regions. What had begun as a personal crisis for the Miller family had expanded into a mission to help preserve family farming across increasingly vulnerable rural communities. This broader purpose had transformed what might have been simply a profitable business opportunity into something more meaningful, a legacy that honored William Miller's vision while addressing challenges he could never have fully anticipated. The technologies developed for a potential post-nuclear environment had found their true purpose in helping agriculture adapt to climate challenges that threaten the viability of traditional farming methods. Dr. Elena Thompson, who had provided the initial assessment of the underground facility, now directed the Archaeological and Historical Research Division of the Innovation Center. Her team was systematically documenting the Cold War facility, while exploring its connections to other classified agricultural research projects from the same era. "What makes this site unique," she explained to visitors, "isn't just the technologies that were developed here, but the integration of practical farming knowledge with theoretical research." William Miller wasn't just providing cover for a government facility. He was actively contributing insights that shaped the research directions and ensured the practical applicability of the innovations being developed. This collaborative approach had become the model for the current operation, with academic researchers, government specialists, and experienced farmers working together to refine and implement the rediscovered technologies. The resulting innovations combined scientific rigor with practical field knowledge, creating systems that could be effectively implemented in real-world farming conditions. As the 5-year anniversary of their discovery approached, Ethan and Lisa had been reflecting on the remarkable journey from desperate, last-ditch effort to regional agricultural transformation. The farm that had been weeks away from foreclosure now formed the heart of an enterprise that was helping preserve family farming across climate-challenged regions while advancing sustainable water management practices that might prove crucial for food security in coming decades. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't taken that final gamble on drilling the well, Lisa said as they prepared for bed that night. If we'd just accepted foreclosure as inevitable and walked away from the farm. Ethan considered the question seriously. I think about that too. All those years, my grandfather knew what was beneath these fields, knowledge that could have saved us from financial disaster at any point. But he kept the secret, followed the protocols, and trusted that somehow the right moment would come for the discovery. And it did, Lisa noted. When we needed it most, when the technologies were finally declassified, when the climate challenges made them more relevant than ever. The timing had indeed been remarkable, the convergence of their personal crisis, the declassification of the Cold War research, and the increasing agricultural challenges created by changing climate patterns. What had seemed like a desperate last stand had instead been the beginning of something far more significant than they could have imagined. The next morning brought a new group of visitors, farmers from drought-stricken regions of California looking to implement the water management systems that had transformed Willow Creek Farm. As Ethan led them through the demonstration fields, explaining the integrated approach that had proven so effective, he felt a deep sense of connection to the land his family had worked for generations and to the grandfather, whose hidden legacy had made their current work possible. What had begun as a desperate $5,000 gamble had revealed secrets that transformed not just the Miller family's fortunes but agricultural practices across increasingly vulnerable farming regions. The broke farmer who had been weeks away from losing everything had discovered a hidden legacy of innovation that was now helping preserve the future of family farming in the face of unprecedented challenges. As William Miller had written in his final journal entry, found sealed in the underground facility, the true value of what we've created here will only be realized when it reaches the fields and farms where it's most needed. I may not live to see that day, but I believe it will come when the time is right and the need is greatest. My greatest hope is that the work we've done in secret will someday help preserve the way of life I've cherished not just for my family but for farming communities across this land. That hope was now being fulfilled in ways William Miller could never have fully imagined, as the innovations he had helped develop decades earlier found their purpose in preserving the agricultural legacy he had valued so deeply. The desperate well-drilling gamble that had seemed like a final, futile gesture had instead uncovered a hidden treasure of knowledge and innovation that was proving more valuable than gold in an era of unprecedented agricultural challenges. 10 years after the discovery beneath Willow Creek Farm, Ethan Miller stood at a podium in Washington, D.C., addressing an international conference on climate-adaptive agriculture. Behind him, a large screen displayed aerial images of what had once been his struggling family farm, now the centerpiece of the global agricultural resilience network that spanned 7 countries and supported over 10,000 family farming operations worldwide. What began as a desperate search for water became something much more significant, Ethan explained to the assembled delegates. It revealed not just technological solutions, but a philosophy of agricultural stewardship that has proven increasingly valuable as we confront unprecedented environmental challenges. The journey from that November day when the drilling rig had first hit the void beneath his eastern field to his current position as a global agricultural innovator still sometimes seemed surreal. The transformation had occurred not in a single, dramatic moment, but through thousands of small decisions, persistent efforts, and a commitment to honoring his grandfather's vision while adapting it to modern realities. As Ethan continued his presentation, he could see Lisa in the front row, now heading the health research division that had developed revolutionary water purification systems being implemented in rural communities around the world. Beside her sat their daughter Emma, 16 years old and already showing the same passionate commitment to agricultural innovation that had characterized both the Miller and Anderson families for generations. The technologies discovered beneath Willow Creek Farm had evolved far beyond their original Cold War designs. The integration of modern computing, material science, and genetic research had transformed promising prototypes into sophisticated systems that were revolutionizing water management in climate-stressed regions worldwide. But the core principles working with natural systems rather than against them, prioritizing sustainability over short-term productivity, and maintaining the viability of family farming operations remained unchanged from William Miller's original vision. After completing his presentation, Ethan joined a panel discussion with agricultural ministers from countries facing severe drought conditions. The conversation highlighted how far the impact of their discovery had spread from a single desperate Iowa farm to national agricultural policies, affecting millions of acres of farmland and the communities that depended on them. The Miller approach isn't just about technology, explained the Brazilian agricultural minister. It's a fundamental shift in how we think about the relationship between farming, water resources, and community sustainability. The integrated systems being implemented across our drought-affected regions are preserving family farming traditions that date back generations while dramatically reducing water consumption. Similar stories came from representatives from India, Kenya, Australia, and Spain, each describing how the water management systems first implemented at Willow Creek Farm had been adapted to local conditions and were helping preserve agricultural communities threatened by changing climate patterns. The technologies had proven remarkably adaptable to diverse geological and climatic conditions, providing solutions that worked not just in the American Midwest, but in vastly different agricultural environments worldwide. Later that evening, at a reception hosted by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Ethan found himself speaking with Dr. Catherine Reeves, now the director of the Agricultural Heritage Conservation Program that had evolved from her previous work with the Department of Energy. "Sometimes I wonder what my grandfather would think of all this," Ethan admitted. "He spent his life keeping these innovations secret, believing they might someday be needed in a post-nuclear world. I don't think he could have imagined how they would ultimately be used." Dr. Reeves smiled thoughtfully. "I've reviewed every document William Miller left in that facility, and I believe he understood more than you might think. His later journals show he was already concerned about potential climate shifts and their impact on agriculture. He may not have been able to speak openly about it, but I believe he was preparing for exactly the challenges we're facing now." She handed Ethan a folder containing copies of recently declassified documents from the Agricultural Shield program. These were just released last month. They include the final assessment of Station 7, written by the program director in 1962, the year before your grandfather's formal involvement ended. Ethan opened the folder to find a typewritten report with numerous official stamps and signatures. One paragraph had been highlighted: Miller's unique contribution to Station 7 goes beyond maintaining the surface cover operation. His practical agricultural knowledge has fundamentally shifted the research direction, focusing the team on sustainable water management systems that would have applications beyond the program's primary contingency scenarios. His insistence on developing technologies that could be implemented by individual farming operations rather than requiring large-scale governmental infrastructure, represents a significant departure from standard protocols, but may ultimately prove more valuable for long-term agricultural sustainability. The validation of his grandfather's vision was profound. William Miller hadn't just been following orders or maintaining a cover story, he had actively shaped the research to serve the farming communities he valued, anticipating needs that wouldn't become widely recognized for decades. The reception continued around them as agricultural officials, scientists, and farmers from around the world discussed challenges and innovations. What had begun as a classified Cold War program had evolved into a global collaborative effort to preserve sustainable agriculture in the face of unprecedented environmental challenges. The next morning, Ethan attended a smaller working session focused specifically on implementing the integrated water management systems in regions facing severe drought conditions. The discussion highlighted how the approach pioneered at Willow Creek Farm was being adapted to diverse agricultural environments worldwide. Dr. Elena Thompson, now leading the International Archaeological Assessment Team that documented similar Cold War facilities around the world, presented findings that placed William Miller's work in a broader historical context. What we're discovering is that the Agricultural Shield Program wasn't unique to the United States, she explained. Similar initiatives existed in several countries, all developing technologies designed for post-conflict agricultural recovery. What makes the Willow Creek facility remarkable is how William Miller's practical farming knowledge influenced the research direction, creating technologies that have proven remarkably adaptable to our current climate challenges. The global expansion of the Miller approach had accelerated dramatically over the previous 5 years, driven by increasingly severe weather patterns that threatened traditional farming methods across multiple continents. What had begun as a desperate effort to save a single-family farm had evolved into an international movement to preserve agricultural communities facing existential threats from changing climate conditions. Later that day, Ethan participated in a roundtable discussion with representatives from family farming organizations from around the world. Their stories reflected both the severe challenges facing traditional agriculture and the hope represented by the innovative approaches developed at Willow Creek Farm. Maria Gonzalez, representing a cooperative of small-scale farmers in drought-stricken regions of Spain, described how the Miller water management systems had transformed communities that had been on the verge of abandonment. 3 years ago, young people were leaving our villages because they saw no future in farming, she explained. Now they're returning, bringing new ideas while preserving traditions that go back centuries. The technology makes continuation possible, but it's the philosophy behind it, the commitment to family farming as a way of life worth preserving, that has truly revitalized our communities. Similar stories came from representatives of farming communities in India, Brazil, Kenya, and Australia, each describing how technologies first implemented on a failing Iowa farm were helping preserve agricultural traditions threatened by changing environmental conditions. As the international conference concluded, Ethan prepared to return to Iowa with a renewed sense of purpose and perspective. The farm that had nearly been lost to foreclosure had become the center of a global movement that was helping preserve family farming as a viable way of life in regions facing severe environmental challenges. The journey back to Willow Creek Farm took Ethan through Chicago, where his sister Rachel was presenting research findings from the Agricultural Health Research Center at a major medical conference. Her work had documented significant health improvements in rural communities that had implemented the water purification technologies developed from the Cold War designs found beneath the farm. The reduction in waterborne contaminants has resulted in measurable health improvements across all demographic groups, Rachel explained to the assembled medical researchers. But the most significant impacts are seen in vulnerable populations, children, the elderly, and those with compromised immune systems. The integration of health research with agricultural innovation represented another unexpected evolution of the Miller legacy. What had begun as a desperate search for irrigation water had expanded to address interconnected challenges facing rural communities worldwide. Returning to Willow Creek Farm, Ethan found the operation bustling with activity that would have been unimaginable 10 years earlier. The fields that had once struggled to support basic crops now showcased diverse agricultural systems designed for resilience in changing climate conditions. The farm buildings that had shown signs of deferred maintenance and financial strain now housed state-of-the-art research facilities while maintaining their historical character and agricultural functionality. Most significantly, the original farmhouse where 3 generations of Millers had lived remained the heart of the operation, not preserved as a museum piece, but continuing to serve as a family home where agricultural traditions were honored while innovations were developed and implemented. Emma, who had accompanied her parents to Washington for the conference, rejoined her high school classmates who were participating in the Young Agricultural Innovators program hosted at the farm. The program brought students from around the world to learn about sustainable farming practices while developing their own innovations to address challenges in their home communities. "Dad, we just tested the new micro-irrigation sensors in the West Field," Emma reported excitedly. "The efficiency improvements are even better than we projected, 23%. Less water usage with a 12% increase in soil nutrient retention." Her passion for agricultural innovation reflected the continuation of a family legacy that now extended far beyond the boundaries of Willow Creek Farm. The technologies developed by her great-grandfather during the Cold War, rediscovered and implemented by her parents during their moment of crisis, were now being further refined by a new generation facing its own unprecedented challenges. That evening, as the farm quieted and the various research teams and student groups departed, Ethan sat with Lisa on the porch of the farmhouse his grandfather had built. The view had changed significantly over the past decade. New research facilities and demonstration plots now extended beyond the original farm boundaries, but the essential character of the land remained unchanged. A working farm that honored traditional agricultural practices while pioneering innovations that might ensure their continuation. "Sometimes I still can't believe how close we came to losing all this," Lisa said, looking out over fields that now represented not just family history, but a vision for agricultural sustainability that was reaching around the world. "I think about that day with the drilling rig a lot," Ethan admitted. "How desperate we were, how convinced that we were witnessing the end of the family legacy rather than a new beginning. If the bit had hit solid rock instead of that void, the what-ifs were indeed profound. If the drilling operation had missed the underground facility by even a few feet, if William Miller had followed standard protocols and decommissioned the site as directed, if Ethan and Lisa had accepted foreclosure as inevitable rather than making that final desperate attempt to save the farm, any of these alternative scenarios would have resulted in the loss of innovations that were now helping preserve agricultural communities around the world. The magnitude of what might have been lost was humbling. The technologies developed during the Cold War, but only fully implemented in the face of contemporary challenges, had proven to be exactly what was needed as agricultural regions worldwide confronted unprecedented environmental stresses. Mark Thompson joined them on the porch, now overseeing global implementation of the water management systems that had first been tested on his neighboring farm. "The data from the Kenya projects just came in," he reported. "First-year results showing 43% improvement in crop yields with 58% reduction in water usage. The Community Leadership Council is already planning expansion to cover 12 additional villages." The international reach of their work sometimes seemed surreal. From the brink of losing a single-family farm to implementing technologies that were helping preserve agricultural communities across multiple continents. What had begun as a desperate last stand had evolved into a movement that was reshaping approaches to climate-adaptive agriculture worldwide. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Ethan walked out to the eastern field where the drilling operation had first discovered the void beneath the farm. The access structure was now professionally designed and integrated into the landscape, but he could still identify the exact spot where Richard Davidson's drilling rig had broken through into the hidden facility that would transform their lives and eventually impact agricultural practices around the world. Standing in the quiet darkness, Ethan reflected on the remarkable journey from that moment of desperate gamble to the global movement that had evolved from it. The operation that had begun with his last $5,000 and a profound sense of impending failure had uncovered not just technological solutions, but a philosophy of agricultural stewardship that was proving increasingly valuable as farming communities worldwide faced unprecedented challenges. William Miller's hidden legacy had extended far beyond what he could have imagined when he agreed to participate in a classified Cold War program more than 7 decades earlier. The technologies he had helped develop, the approach to sustainable agriculture he had championed even within the constraints of a government facility, had found their true purpose in helping preserve family farming as a viable way of life in an era of environmental challenges that threatened its very existence. As dawn approached, Ethan returned to the farmhouse that had been his family's home for 3 generations. The day ahead would bring more visitors, agricultural officials from drought-stricken regions, researchers developing new applications for the water management technologies, students learning sustainable farming practices they would implement in their home communities. The work of preserving family farming in the face of unprecedented challenges continued, building on a legacy that had nearly been lost but was now helping shape the future of agriculture worldwide. The desperate well-drilling gamble that had seemed like a final futile gesture had instead uncovered innovations that were proving more valuable than gold in an era of environmental uncertainty. The broke farmer who had been weeks away from losing everything had discovered a hidden legacy that was now helping preserve agricultural traditions and communities around the world. That success was now evident not just in the thriving operation at Willow Creek Farm, but in agricultural communities around the world implementing the integrated water management approach pioneered there. The legacy of innovation and stewardship that had been hidden beneath Iowa soil for decades was now helping ensure that family farming, one of humanity's oldest and most essential traditions, would remain viable even in the face of unprecedented environmental challenges. The story that had begun with a desperate $5,000 gamble by a farmer on the verge of losing everything had evolved into a global movement that was transforming approaches to sustainable agriculture while preserving the family farming traditions that William Miller had valued so deeply. The void beneath Willow Creek Farm had contained not just Cold War technology but a vision for agricultural resilience that was proving more relevant with each passing year, a hidden treasure of knowledge and innovation that was helping secure the future of farming communities worldwide. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.